Hello, and welcome to HiveMind Network's webinar series on the Omnichannel Challenge in Retailing. I'm Paul Zagieski, Managing Partner at HiveMind Network. With us today are three leading experts in retailing, manufacturing, and supply chain business solutions. Each heads up their own professional services firm, and each is an expert practitioner in the HiveMind Network. Bill Mirabito is CEO of B2C Partners, a consultancy dedicated to delivering a complete portfolio of retailing business solutions to some of the largest companies in the industry. Nikki Baird is Managing Partner of Retail Systems Research and is a nationally known thought leader in retailing. Nikki provides insights on market trends, success stories, and opportunities for innovation in the future of retailing. She's a sought-after speaker at conferences and provides strategic advice to senior executives in all parts of the retailing industry. Sandy Vosk is founder and president of Advantage Technology Solutions, ATS, which specializes in business intelligence and supply chain solutions, with particular focus on adding value through innovative technologies in manufacturing, retailing, logistics, and related industries. We're very pleased to be bringing you these experts to share insights on the Omnichannel Challenge. Before we begin this first session, a word about HiveMind Network. HiveMind is a values-based expert network. Each expert practitioner member is a top independent provider of expertise in their field. HiveMind provides a range of services to meet client needs just in time. These include market insight, expert advice, coaching to improve performance, and hands-on solution delivery to augment a client company's resources. One contract with HiveMind Network makes all this expertise available as needed. HiveMind experts are committed to shared values of collaboration and client satisfaction, making us unique in the professional services industry. There'll be more about HiveMind later on. Now, I'd like to turn the mic over to Sandy Vosk to introduce us to Omnichannel, the age of the customer.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today speaking with you on this topic. Although it seems like the age of the customer has been forever. Certainly over the last 20 years, been involved in everything from W.E. Deming and quality to just the focus on the customer in our entire industries. But what's really empowering this is mobility. And there are currently over 1 billion smartphone users on the planet, and they're changing the shopping experience in powerful ways. Omnichannel refers to a consistent consumer shopping experience, whether it's a PC, tablet, smartphone, or a wearable device. In terms of retail, an effective omnichannel strategy is about making sure customers can buy the products they want, regardless of where they choose to buy, in the store, via the web, and more in some combination of the two. I love this slide and came across it a couple of years ago about what happens in an internet minute. Eric Schmidt, founder CEO of Google, said that between the birth of the world in 2003, there were 5 exabytes of information created, now doing it every 2 days. An exabyte equals 1 quintillion bytes or 1 billion gigabytes of information. I have no idea really when he said that, but I bet we're now doing that in under a day, and that doesn't count the Internet of Things. In an Internet minute today, there's now 2.4 million in e-commerce sales. And if Amazon alone is down, they lose $66,000 a minute. In 2014, there was $3 trillion in retail sales, of which 10%, $300 billion, was purchased online. Yet research suggests that almost 50% of purchases, 1.4 trillion, are actually being influenced by creating digital experiences to bring consumers into the store. As I said before, it's not a new topic. Sam Walton said a long time ago, there's only one boss, the customer. But what kind of technologies will be required to support customers' rising consumer expectations in today's world? The retail industry certainly has its challenges, as it was built to fit a store, not a customer. The majority are running today on legacy systems, relational databases, and spreadsheets. From the RSResearch that was shared at a recent SPS Commerce conference, 43% of retailer product data is wrong. 80% of their own executives have no confidence in it. 64% of product information that is stored and distributed by retailers today is still via spreadsheet. We speak about and hear about omnichannel, but only a very small percentage have implemented an omnichannel strategy. They appear stuck like a deer in headlights. Nikki Baird, partner at Retail Systems Research, will be speaking more about this in the next few minutes. This is truly disruptive, another level of disruptive innovation. I got to listen to Geoffrey Moore recently. He was a huge influencer on me personally from a 1991 book entitled Crossing the Chasm, which turned into a theory, and it's still very relevant today about the adoption of technology. But in his presentation, and as you'll see in his new book, if you get a chance to read it, he still has his finger on the pulse of technology adoption, and he spoke about 3 specific phases of disruptive innovation. In the 90s, PCs and ERP and internet resulted in what he called systems of record. And post-2000, the focus has really been on mobility, smartphones, software as a service, public cloud, and which has now resulted in systems of engagement, how you engage your customers, which has changed everything. And the retail supply chain must re-engineer its systems of record to adapt to this new world. The next wave, which is already upon us, is sensors and analytics and private cloud, systems of intelligence, which is really what the Internet of Things is all about. But to compete in this world, there's a need for collaboration, and internally and externally. Research says a consumer spends 75% more when combining their retail and mobile experience. Retailers now seek an endless aisle of merchandise, which is not and no longer constrained to in-store purchasing. This raises questions such as which items should be sold in brick-and-mortar stores, which will only be sold online, and which in multiple channels. Planning is far more complicated because of the online and mobile requirements for significantly more attributes to be shared. This includes item details, price, digital images, video clips, and customer ratings. Omnichannel is a paradigm shift for order fulfillment, orders, shipments, payments, and returns. To compete with Amazon, retailer and supplier communities must collaborate, sharing real-time inventory and item information, as well as key business metrics concerning sell-through demand and fulfillment of orders. Now, in terms of a roadmap and what some folks are doing or can do, it's my pleasure to introduce Nikki Baird to take the controls from here. Nikki?
Thank you, Sandy. Let me share my screen. Give me just one moment. And get it in the right spot. All right. So yes, omnichannel, a lot of change. And that's really where I'm going to pick up the story, is where some of this change has become sort of so overwhelming that we're finding places where retailers are kind of going astray. So I had a great introduction from Paul about myself and RSR and HiveMind. And Sandy actually referenced some of the research that we've done in the past. I just wanted to spend a quick moment. We do a lot of benchmark research. We survey retailers about their attitudes and intentions around technology, their business strategy, and how the two relate. But actually, I'm not going to share a lot of that data today. I'm going to tell some stories, because I think that those are sort of a little bit easier for people to relate to, and particularly when it comes to things that are disruptive and kind of cause a lot of anxiety. being able to relate to a story rather than a number might actually help a little bit. So I'm going to tell a story about three parts or three places within Omnichannel where the strategy can go astray. And I call these three lost in the minutia, organizational quicksand, and shellac. And I'll show you what I mean by each of those things. So let's start with the first one. The first one is getting lost in the minutia. Retailers are facing new processes that we've never done before. And this requires an understanding of things like how consumers shop at levels of granularity that we've never had to understand before. I mean, it used to be that shopper behavior, right? That was the realm of brands. Brands had the most interest in understanding shelf approach and the decisions that consumers made at the shelf. And as we've seen with online and how consumers begin their shopping journeys in the digital realm, take it sometimes to the retailer's e-commerce site and then into the store. There's a lot more visibility into how consumers shop, but it's also visibility into how much that shopping process has changed. It's really been sort of upended. The decision isn't made at the shelf anymore. It's made before the retailer even chooses which retailer they're going to shop at. And that creates just a lot of questions, a lot of change. Throw in that shoppers are adopting mobile, as Sandy mentioned, and it's generating new behaviors on their part at a speed that we've just never seen before. And retailers have to respond. Well, the problem with that is that it's a lot of questions and a lot of change that just keeps piling on. And even the little questions are the hard questions. They all need to be answered, processes need to be defined and figured out, but when you get too many of them all at once, it just sort of sinks the boat, or in this case, it knocks over the truck. But it's questions like, who gets credit for a cross-channel sale? I've seen retailers get into yelling matches at each other. Colleagues get into yelling matches over who gets credit for a cross-channel sale. What do you do with online merchandise returned to stores? I was just at a user conference where one of the vendor's customers were presenting their returns process, and the speaker put up this diagram that even if you were sitting in the front row, you could not read it. And it was the decision tree that they expected their store associates to take on what to do with online merchandise that was returned to the store. There were so many contingencies involved. Well, is it a product that's carried in the store? Yes or no? If it's not carried in the store, then is it a product that has a high likelihood of being sold in the store? Yes or no? I mean, the decision tree for this thing was it was crazy. Same thing with payments. How do you handle payments for split orders? Everybody wants to save the sale, but when a customer comes into a store and they've got 3 things in their cart that they want to buy right here and now, and 2 more that they want to order through Save the Sale, is that 2 separate transactions? Can you do that as 1 transaction? There's a lot of payment rules and security constraints around, can you authorize against a card if it's not going to ship right away? No, you can't. How do you manage all of that? And again, I've seen the decision trees and the process flows that retailers are trying to put together to manage these new kinds of processes that they've never really had to manage before. And it's crazy. I was actually talking to a retailer last week who has piloted ship from store, and they stopped their pilot. And I was shocked because ship from store, especially if you're an apparel retailer, the business case for ship from store is actually really substantial. And this retailer said, it is substantial. In our pilot, we were finding, huge benefit. There's no doubt that we'll roll it out to our entire organization. The problem is that it raised so many questions that we didn't know how to answer, that we had to just stop and take a step back and start over from scratch, because we didn't know whether we were going to staff to fill these orders separately from the sales floor staff. We couldn't decide whether we were going to pick these orders before and after store hours or during store hours. We couldn't decide how to reward store associates who spent their time picking orders as opposed to helping customers. And just as all of these questions piled on, we just saw the process sort of tilting to the side and potentially falling over. And we knew we just needed to stop. So the takeaway from this first one, getting lost in the minutiae, is it is a lot of change, right? And it's doing things that you've never done before. I've had people say, oh, we've shipped from store. We've done that. I worked at a retailer that we did ship from store. If a customer called and asked for it, and they were willing to give their credit card over the phone, you betcha we would take that order and we would ship it. But saying that we've done that in the past and looking at ship from store that's supporting online ordering, where stores might hit benchmarks of 200 orders a day. And I've talked to retailers who have had stores that are hitting that kind of level. That is not the same process. That is not the same thing at all as taking a phone call from a customer and a store associate on their own initiative boxing it up and shipping it out, right? It is a completely different process. And retailers need to really sort of acknowledge and get in front of the fact that, even though it seems like it's a simple process, ship from store, we've done it before, it's actually not. And if you acknowledge that, I think it will help you be able to carry the load more easily. The next one I want to talk about is organizational quicksand. So the organizations that exist in retail today were never designed to support functioning in an omni-channel world. The idea of multiple channels was not something that we ever really conceived. And if we did, we wanted to keep them isolated, right? You had a wholesale division and then you had a retail division. And even though they both ended up getting to the same customers in the end, never did the two interact with each other. And that just isn't the case anymore. But I'll bring that one to life with an example, which is marketing. So merchandising used to be the most powerful organization within the retail enterprise, but that is definitely changing. As focusing on the customer becomes more important, so does the marketing organization, who is the de facto owner of all of that customer data. That alone is a cause for disruption, right? Because marketing used to exist only as a method for advertising the promotions and offers that merchandisers negotiated out of vendors. And that age is pretty much gone, even to some degree in grocery. But the marketing organization itself is disrupted as well. Most retailers, when they established their e-commerce arm, they set it up as a separate division, right? It was very isolated from the rest of the organization. And originally the intent was if it didn't work out, we were just going to kill it. Well, obviously it worked out very well, but now some of those decisions are really coming back to haunt retailers, and marketing is the first place where we really saw that disruption kind of come to a head, because an e-commerce site, its very existence is not advertising, unlike with the store, right? You open a store, you put the logo on the front, people drive by and see it. That is in its own way a form of brand awareness. Well, people can't drive by and see your online store. And so e-commerce teams grew up marketing people who focused on digital marketing and who spent their time really driving traffic to the website. Well, they were starting to tell a brand story that didn't actually have as much to do with the main enterprise brand story that the marketing resources there were telling. And as consumers crossed channels, the gaps between those stories became very apparent. Marketing is the face to the customer. It's the first face to the customer. And so it became just very, very clear that something needed to be done about it. So some retailers just took all those digital marketing resources in e-commerce and they yanked them out and they dumped them in the traditional marketing group and said, we all have to work together. We all have to tell the same story. We all have to get along. Well, the retailers who did that, what they found happened in their e-commerce division was there was nobody left who was focused on driving traffic to the website. And web sales would actually suffer as a result. And right now, e-commerce is the engine of growth within most retail enterprises. So to have that engine falter was really scary. So some retailers, what they did was they took those digital marketing resources and they dumped them back in e-commerce. And they said, oops, never mind, didn't mean to do that. And then they dragged out the word that anybody involved in organizational design or organizational change just dreads, and that is the matrix organization. So now there are some retailers out there who have resources that are marketing resources that report to e-commerce, but have a dotted line relationship to the main marketing organization, and they've had to build processes and meetings and ways to exchange information so that all of these marketing resources can tell the same story, but the digital marketing resources can focus on it in a way that still helps benefit the e-commerce site specifically, as well as telling the whole brand story overall. Well, that's an enormous amount of disruption and change. I mean, I can barely imagine what it must be like to be in that kind of change, right? Today you report to this person, tomorrow you report to that person, and oops, we were wrong, now you gotta go report to that person again. It's just crazy. And I see a lot of retailers getting bogged down in this organizational design mess, right? Which organization should be doing what? And they're spending so much time worried about how to divide up the work, which is important. I'm not trying to belittle that at all, but they are losing sight of who is important, and that's the customer. So that's kind of the takeaway from this particular one. Ultimately, whatever change is happening to you, as long as the whole company stays focused on the customer and doing right by that customer, then it kind of makes this more manageable. Whatever you're doing, as long as you're doing it for her, then you should be okay. There's also an important recognition that people don't change quickly, and organizations change even slower than that. Organizational change takes time. When I was in the heart of it as a consultant, we allowed for 5 years minimum for major changes to really take hold in an organization. So just think about whatever changes that you're making today, they're not really going to be set in your organization until 2020. When you think about what does the consumer shopping experience, what will that look like in 2020? Well, it's not going to look anything like this. I can promise you that. I can't tell you what it will be exactly. As much as an analyst, I would love to be able to know what that is. The reality is nobody knows, but it is going to be different. And that means there's even more change that we've got to pile on top of the changes that we're experiencing now. So even the companies that recognize this and have embraced the fact that they've acknowledged that they're taking on a lot of change, it's still hard to remember how much of a toll it takes on people when all of this change is happening. And I think even just acknowledging it and showing that you have respect for their pain that they're going through goes a long way and really helps soften some of the blows or some of the tendencies for people to forget about what this all is for. This is all for the customer, and this is all for the future survival of the company that they're working for. And if you can get them kind of all to embrace that, then it kind of helps make this a little bit easier to accept. And then finally, the third area that I wanted to talk about is something that I call shellac or shellacking. The last place where omnichannel can go awry starts at the top with the executive team. And I debated about whether to put this in the front of the presentation because it's sort of the biggest problem, or to save it for the last. And in the end, I saved it for the last because I realized that the other two issues, right, getting lost in the minutiae and some of this organizational quicksand, these are really, even though they're substantial issues on their own, they actually are symptoms of this larger problem, which is that the executive team sees omnichannel not as foundational change or transformative change, but as a coat of paint that they can apply to their organization and be done with it. I think my favorite one, and it's popular right now, is you can't apply a coat of digital to your in-store experience and call it omnichannel, right? The store experience has to change. And I see too many executives who say that they believe in omnichannel, that they understand that they need to be focused on the customer, that they see the amount of change that is coming to their organizations, but then they spend all their time trying to preserve their organizations as they exist today. Stores is a perfectly good example of this. Supply chain, another really good example of this. The retailers who have run out and embraced ship from store, they do this thinking to themselves that, oh, we're just adding stores to the supply chain. Well, no, that has a huge impact on your supply chain. It has a huge impact on what you consider to be a fast mover versus a slow mover. A lot of the retailers who have been very forward thinking around ship from store, they're suffering impacts around split shipments because they've opened up store inventory, but when a customer orders multiple items in their order, you can't always get them all from the same place. And so one of the things that they've started doing is they've started holding back more inventory in their e-commerce DC than they ever thought they would need to stock before. Well, that has a cascading effect too, because the e-commerce DC was never designed to hold all of this inventory. And so now they're finding themselves in a situation where they're looking at building another e-commerce DC. That was not the result that they expected when they said they were going to ship from store. So there's lots of unknown consequences to the decisions that we're making because nobody's ever made these decisions before. And if you approach omnichannel with the perspective of, I have to preserve things the way that they are, I have to protect my organizations from all of this change, then you're not going to make the changes that you need to make in order to get the capabilities that you need to have to respond to the demands that an omnichannel shopper has. So the takeaway from this one is very similar to the takeaways from the last two, which is you really need to focus on the customer. If you focus on the customer, if you truly put her at the center of your business, then every question that comes up can be determined or examined in the context of what it means to her. Who gets credit for a cross-channel sale? Does she care? No. She does care, however, that employees are incented to make a cross-channel sale. That's a very important distinction. So whatever answer you come up with should make sure that it addresses that need. The changes that you need to make to think customer first rather than product first, they're profound. And they won't happen if retailers spend all their time trying to preserve their old ways of doing business rather than embracing the change that's coming their way. Without that commitment to that level of change, then omnichannel is almost guaranteed to go awry. So I told you I would give you 3 places where omnichannel goes astray, and I have. You can get lost in the minutiae of new process decisions. You can get lost in the organizational quicksand of how do you organize your company in order to respond to all of these new processes and new demands from consumers. But the worst thing that you can do is think that omnichannel is the coat of paint that you can spray onto your organization and suddenly be able to present one face to the customer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Folks, you'll notice that in the bottom of your screen or elsewhere in your screen, if you're dialed in or connected to us by the web, you'll notice that there is a Q&A button or a Q&A window. And if you want to pose a question to any of the speakers today, please feel free to put it in there. I have a question that I actually wanted to start with. This is for Nikki. You've mentioned it just a bit, but I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on mobile use and how the use of mobile devices is changing the in-store experience, good and bad.
Yeah, it's fascinating because when consumers first started bringing their phones into the stores, so a lot of people think, 2007, Apple came out with the iPhone, that's when everything changed. And for retailers, I don't think that's actually true. I think was really more around 2011, the holiday season that Amazon released their price checker app, where you could scan a barcode while you were standing at a shelf in a store, and Amazon would do a price comparison. And of course, if their price was better, you could buy it right through the app on your phone. And that was really when retailers sort of declared war against mobile phones because they saw it as a way of bringing in competition from within the store that they'd never had to face before. But I think that, the shopping behaviors are even more subtle than that. I mean, I see it myself as a shopper, right? I used to, when I went to the grocery store, if they were out of stock of an item that I wanted, I would substitute. But my willingness today to substitute is teeny, teeny, teeny. Like if it's not there, then I'm pulling out my phone and I'm looking up the product. And you bet I'm looking at Amazon first. And if they have it, you know, gee, conveniently, there's a buy a subscription for 5% off. And sure, because I know I'll be looking for it next time too. And if it's not here, then I'm done as a shopper. Like retailers anticipate that the store serves a certain set of needs and can create, you know, certain opportunities for shoppers, but mobile changes what those opportunities are significantly. And I think that retailers both overestimate their impact from a competitive standpoint, and they underestimate their impact in terms of how consumers respond to the barriers that retailers, whether intentionally or unintentionally, throw up against an in-store shopping experience.
That's very interesting. Listen, I know that we have some attendees who represent what I would call luxury brands. I'd be curious if you could address how the omnichannel challenge is different for high-end or luxury brand retailers than for other kinds of retailers, if there is a difference.
Yeah, you know what? There is a difference, in part because I mean, if you are the luxury brand, it's a little bit of a different story than if you are like a luxury department store, because you know, every retailer has to have their own brand these days, but department stores and mass retail in general, you know, they've built themselves off of, I have the best brands, and increasingly everybody has access to the best brands. So the story that you know, a department store retailer has to tell is a little more complicated today than it ever was before, because I can get the same brands at any one of those department stores, right? It's a tougher sell. I've heard a lot of pushback from luxury retailers saying, our customers don't like to use technology. And that's true if you are only interested in older shoppers. I mean, as shoppers age, you know, I guess the better way to put it is older shoppers have not embraced technology to the degree that younger shoppers have, but you've got to prepare for that next generation where they are very digitally native. And I've found that there's a lot of luxury retailers who have been very slow to embrace technology, and the excuse has been, well, our shoppers don't use it. Well, maybe your current shoppers don't, but those people don't live forever. So you've got to find a way to be relevant to people who expect a much more digital experience as part of how they engage with you. But I think luxury brands actually, in that regard, once they embrace it, they have it easier because they have so much content to work with. I mean, the brands themselves all are producing videos, there's runway shows, there's blogs, there's movie stars that wear their stuff. I mean, there's so much content and lifestyle that can be built around a luxury brand that, I mean, to say, you know, oh, it's much harder as a luxury brand to embrace it. No, try building that kind of content around a can of peas, man. And you're talking about a very different challenge.
So I have a couple more questions. We're still waiting for one to come in from the audience, but one more or a couple more I want to throw at you. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about new store designs that are being tried to augment or improve the in-store experience given the omni-channel trend.
Yeah, you know, the trend around store design right now seems to be around store designs that are very flexible and changeable, and that have a heavy social element to them. So Urban Outfitters, for example, opened a model store in New York. I actually think it's in the Bronx. And they put a rooftop bar on it, right? So you know, Tommy Hilfiger actually has gone a long way towards their opening restaurants alongside their stores. They're trying to find lifestyle experiences that complement their brands and put those alongside their stores as a way to sort of increase the frequency of visit, right? You've got more odds of going there for a social occasion more often than you might to shop for apparel. And I think it's interesting. Or you look at, you know, on that frequency and changeability, flexibility of the store. Story, another retailer that's in New York, they're kind of in the Soho area. They change out their whole entire product set every month. The downside to that is they have to close their store for a week to change the set because they're changing the whole store. And so now you're talking about, you're cutting your available selling time by 1/12, right? Like 1 week a month. And so I'm just not sure how that's going to work, like long term. But the fact that what they're trying to do is they're trying to create experiences that keep shoppers coming back. And those experiences meet more than just basic product needs. They speak to some kind of either social experience or lifestyle-driven experience. And that, to me, seems definitely to be a longer running trend in store design.
I want to pass along a question that's come in from the audience. It again addresses the luxury brand retailing experience. And the question is, what do you see as the most disruptive omnichannel trend in luxury retail?
In luxury, the most disruptive. I mean, I hate to say this, but in some ways, Amazon promises to be the most disruptive. They want to get in apparel, and they sure have no qualms about selling luxury fashion. And again, this is the distinguish between being the brand and being the department store, because as a department store, you don't really want to do business with Amazon. They are straight up a competitor. As a brand, they're not, because where are they going to get the product, right? It's like if Amazon sells Coach benefits. Like, it's not like Amazon's going to come up with a private label version of Coach and be successful like they've done to some of the electronics components, for example. And so, right now, Amazon's not very good at selling apparel or fashion, let alone luxury, but their willingness to do that is high. So I think that does promise to be very disruptive in the relationships, and alongside that, the brands themselves going direct to consumer. That also is creating a lot of disruption in the industry. But it's the same deal. It's like the department stores have a lot of concentrated buying power, and for these brands to really reach consumers the way that they want to, they kind of have to do it themselves, because those department stores have a lot of power and aren't necessarily interested in giving one brand dominance over their customer set. So Amazon's interesting from that perspective, because from everything I've seen, they're sort of a little bit more willing to be flexible. They want desperately to learn how to sell fashion, and they've got no problem, listing $3,000, $5,000 items on their website. So that promises to be very disruptive.
Of course, we're open for any of the attendees to ask further questions of our experts, contacting us directly, first name dot last name at hivemynetwork.com. We'll reach them by email. We've come to the end of our allotted time. I want to thank Sandy, Nikki, and Bill for sharing their insights today. Just a quick heads up, coming up next in HiveMind's Omnichannel webinar series, on June 8th at 12 noon Eastern Time, we'll look at the supply chain strain. How can companies manage physical inventory and the enormous amount of data created in the supply chain to perform better in an omnichannel retailing environment? On June 24th, we wrap up our series by looking at what's working in retailing in the age of the customer. We look forward to having you join us for both of these webinars. The registration link is on the HiveMind site. Thank you very much for joining us today. Make it a good day.